Now, you a a couple of years after you began, you apprenticed with a couple of luthiers in different countries, right? You were with Paul Doyle in Ireland for a bit, Jeffrey Yong in
Yes.
Malaysia, and you mentioned how you still like to take a few weeks off and talk to other builders and exchange, share build philosophies. So, what is a build philosophy? What is your build philosophy, and how has it evolved since you began?
Okay. So when I talk about build philosophies, I think it's more in terms of, uh, let me back up one step. Sorry.
Sure.
When builders normally start out and they go and hang out with senior builders, the conversations are more about how do you do this?
Right.
How do you do that?
Okay.
How do you do this inlay? How do you attach the neck in this particular way? Or how do you do your fretwork? How do you get this finish on your instrument?
Right.
Which is all very critical because you do need to know the how
Those
in
are
order to
basics.
build a few guitars and
Right.
get them out in the market. Because if it's a business for you, you need to sell guitars at the end of the day.
Right.
Once you've done that part of it, right? Once that part is over and done with, the more interesting part becomes, for me, the more interesting bit becomes about why are you doing this?
Okay.
Great, you've got this bracing layout. It's very beautiful. Why?
Right.
Okay, your tops are invariably 1.5 times thicker than the next person. Why?
Right.
Your instruments have a sound hole and they've got a sound port. Why? You've incorporated certain elements in your instrument which are not what most people do. Why?
Right.
Right. And then you have discussions regarding that. It's not there's no right or wrong because every builder is going to follow his own chain of thought and work with what he or she thinks is best, obviously, because the idea is to do whatever you can to improve yourself and also to try and stand out from the other builders who are in the market.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone has a different approach to it. Right. Some people like to add more and more elements into an instrument.
Okay.
Where the mindset is the more I offer, the better value a client may see.
And I'd imagine some people are minimalist on the other opposite end of the
So,
spectrum.
exactly. So when I initially started out, I tried for a short period of time to add a bunch of things onto my instruments.
Okay.
And because at that point I felt like, okay, this is a good way to go because I've got this, I've got that, I've got a sound port, I've got an arm bevel, I've got a number of inlay things going on the instrument, and they look beautiful and they'll sound great.
Right.
As I build more and more, every passing year, I try and remove something from it.
Okay.
From that equation. Okay.
Right.
Unless there is a specific requirement for a client and the guy's like, I need these 3 things.
Right.
That's a separate case. But by and large, I will, each year try and just see, okay, can I do away with this particular element and still have a guitar that sounds really great and still looks elegant and still does what it needs to do while adding overall aesthetic and playability value to it.
Right.
Right. So over the years, my designs, I think, have simplified in terms of the kind of inlay work. It's not that there isn't. There is inlay work. There are certain elements which are very clearly my signature elements on the instrument. But at the same time, I'm trying to do more with less.
Okay.
So folks will come to me saying, can you inlay mother of pearl all over the fretboard? Can you put in abalone shell here and there? And I don't do those things. I prefer to keep it simple.
Okay.
Yeah, I want my guitar to do the talking.
Fair enough. And what would you say is your signature? Like how would one recognize a BigFoot guitar?
The most the standout bit would be the Rosette. Okay. If you take a look at the sound holes of my instruments, you'll notice there's my default setting is an ebony ring with stone inlay in it, and it's a design that I have not seen anywhere else. It's a design that I think is simple but elegant, and I think it brings in a little bit of India into the element, into the aesthetic of the instrument.
Right.
And it works for me. I'm happy with it. It came about as a result of just fooling around on a piece of paper many years ago, and my wife was helping me out with it. at the time, and we said let's go ahead and try this out. And I liked how it came out, and then I just kind of refined it a little bit from there.
Right.
And then gradually now I've added similar elements to the headstock and to the end graft, which is if your guitar had a jack being plugged in at the butt of the guitar.
Yeah.
So I do a similar inlay over there as well. So it kind of ties in the aesthetic of the instrument without being too in your face.
Understood.
Yeah. So it's not blingy, but it's there.
Understated.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, as a luthier, you're always in search of the perfect tone, right? And this is subjective, I feel, and it changes from person to person. How do you know when you've achieved perfect tone for someone else? What are the things that have to go right to get there? And what is the whole calibration process like? Do you is the tone set right from the beginning when you plan it out, or is it something that develops as you go through the build process?
Okay, this is a slightly more complicated one because there's varying levels to it, right? Okay. The way I approach it is my guitars have a sound. Yeah. There is a certain tone that my instruments have that attracts people to it.
Okay.
If you're a musician who likes the sound of my instruments as a starting point, that's a base starting point, right? From there, I have the ability to control or vary things a little bit up or down.
Okay.
I don't have an EQ setting where someone says, can you make the bass more and the treble less or the treble higher and the bass less? I don't. They're not knobs that I'm turning over there, right? It's a system, and that system works in a particular way.
Okay.
So if someone likes the traditional vintage Martin sound, I can't offer it to them.
Right.
Okay. Because that's not what my guitars sound like. And if I promise that to a client, I'm not doing them any favors.
Right.
Because I'm going to go through 6 months and build the damn thing, and they're going to get the guitar and say, this does not sound like a vintage Martin to me.
Right.
There are other builders who do that. So I usually just recommend them and say, why don't you reach out to so-and-so in the US or wherever else, and you'll be happier. Because the last thing I want is someone who is not on the same page as me in terms of what I provide and what they're expecting. The two things have to match. Right. So for me, I think varying tone, controlling tone can be done to an extent, in the sense, if someone says, I don't want a super bass heavy instrument, I can help balance out the overall tone. That's possible.
Okay.
But I can't simulate the sound of another guitar. I can't do that.
Right.
Okay.
And why would you? You're a custom guitar.
That's exactly it. Right. And there are ways to do it. It's not that it can't be done. There are ways to do it, but those are mastered by people who've been doing that their entire career.
Right.
For me, when I start, I'm not thinking about another person's instrument in my mind, because it doesn't help me.
Right.
Because I don't know what that person was thinking when they built that guitar.
Makes sense.
I don't know what their bracing layout is, and frankly, I don't care. It may be a beautiful sounding guitar, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
It's not that I don't appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's just, it's not my thing.
Right. Got it.
So I'm here to provide an instrument that sounds like a BigFoot, not one that sounds like another builder. I can't do that.
That's fair, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So I work from there. And then, like I said, little things, if someone comes and says, okay, I'm not too fond of harsh trebles, then I can do things to loosen up the top a little bit, so that I've got a better bass, a lower end response.
Right.
Or I've got ways to make the treble sound a little fatter instead of sounding harsh and tinny. So those are minor variations, but they are minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.